check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
Hey everyone, I want to let you know about a new sponsor of the podcast being Johnson Quail, and for nearly 30 years they produce premium Coturnix quail for falconers across the U.S. and Alaska. They're a small family-owned business trusted by the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota, the Minnesota Zoo, and the Cornell Raptor Program. I've now used these quail to feed my own birds, and they're pretty nice size, and they're aged around 35 to 37 days and around 8 ounces per bird. So they're nice, good quality birds, and they are fed with custom formulated feed and frozen with dry ice and packed well for shipment. So whether you need 60 birds or 6,000, they've got you covered. If you want to put in an order, call Kevin at 507-213-9005 or go to johnsonquail.com. And if you use the promo code Chronicles, you get 10% off your first order. Johnson Quail, trusted since 1995.
I get out there and I put him up, and he's going up 600-700 feet, and he's just going, oh, this is going to be great. And I'm just about to start sneaking around. And all of a sudden, he just kind of stopped and sort of set his wings, and then kind of just starts drifting down out into the field. I go, what the hell's going on? And I got my binos and I'm looking, and there was a dead deer that had been hit by a car the night before or something, falling down there, and all the vultures and crows, they were eating this thing. And so he goes down there and starts chomping on this deer.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and this episode was another recorded remotely with Tim Gallagher, and some of you might have heard that name before and maybe even read some of the books he's written, but Tim has been in falconry for a very long time and has a lot of amazing experiences, that many of which we're going to talk about during this episode, and also talk about some of the research that went into writing some of those books and some of his experiences from traveling around the world and getting to do a lot of really neat stuff for his career, and also some more of his fond memories and recollections of time spent with other fairly well-known names in falconry. So hope you enjoy this, and as always, we're going to jump right in. Here we go. Now, thanks for going ahead and doing this a little early. I know this is kind of short notice, and we were supposed to be scheduled for a little bit later, but I'm glad.
That's better anyway. I like to get stuff done.
I do too.
Where are you?
Southern Indiana.
Oh, I thought you were Indiana, but I think of that as being more northern. It's not like people down in Texas or Louisiana or something.
No, I'm down in Evansville, southernmost tip of Indiana, so that's where I'm at. But
do you know Greg Thomas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know Greg.
Yeah.
He's. I know him. I know pretty much most of the older and newer Indiana folks.
Well, he's the one that comes to mind with Indiana. I first met him when I was 16, and we were at the NAFA meet in Centerville, South Dakota, and I saw him take his first rabbit. First
nice.
head of game, whatever.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, it's great hearing all the, especially the guys that have been in this for a really long time and everything. It's always cool to hear kind of some of the backstories of interactions with some of these guys like yourself and Greg, and they've been around for a while, and it seems like there's always these little, kind of fun interactive stories that are always kind of just there and nobody ever seems to hear about. So
yeah.
But yeah, so have you been in New York most of your life and career then, or have you been all around?
No, I spent years out west. I mean, I'm originally from England, but I lived there for a few years, and then I moved to Canada. So I'm used to this climate. I'm about a 5-hour drive from where I used to live in Canada right now. But then we moved to California, and
Okay.
that's where I took up falconry, really at the age of 12.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're another one of these guys then that was doing it long before, a lot of the original stuff was in place, and,
when Kennedy was in the White House.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I didn't know if you were another one of these guys that got into it before the rules and regs and all that kind of stuff, or.
Well, there were rules. It's funny, pretty early on in the 60s, you needed to have a permit in California, but you had to be 16.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got caught by a game warden, trying to catch house sparrows with my kestrel.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, and he went to my house and everything, and he said, well, it looks like you're taking good care of the bird, so I'm not going to confiscate it. But someone in this house has to get a license for you to get the bird. And I was afraid to ask my dad, but my mom came through. And so for about my first 3 years as a falconer, I was Daphne Gallagher.
Mm.
and actually, I ran into that game warden later out in a little park, chasing sparrows again. And he stopped and he kind of rousted me and wanted to see my permit, and and he looked at it and kind of smiled, and then he came and was helping me flush sparrows, and my bird caught a sparrow, and he just said, "Well, way to go, Daphne."
Yeah, you look like a Daphne, though.
Right.
Yeah, it's fitting. Yeah, you pass for a Daphne. Whatever. No, that's hilarious. No, I have. You're not the first guy that I've talked to that has had an interesting bunch of California stories. They're, especially whenever things were still kind of like in that sort of kind of ish gray area, phase. And yeah, there's other guys that I've talked to that had some interesting stories about similar types of interactions, I'll say.
Yeah. It was. I don't know. That went from that, like about 5 or 6 years later, it was like we had a really terrible relationship with the California Department of Fish and Game, and just certain wardens were coming out really hassling people, wanting to see their mews and this and that.
Mm.
And even, coming when no one was home and confiscating a bird, and, when it was legal. We had some bad, and that's why the California Hawking Club sort of got reorganized when it did and became a much more, active, trying to defend what's going, falconry.
Mm-hmm.
When, Jack Hagan became the president, and Bob Coleman was heavily involved. And I went up to I think it was 1970. I went up with Jack Hagan and Jeff Sipple. We drove up to Moore Park where they had a big meeting where we're going, and that's when, because the California Hawking Club existed, but it wasn't the same organization. And, and we had then journals and newsletters and things, and it was very proactive.
Mm-hmm. Well, and were you involved directly with any of that, as far as the kind of the reformation and kind of substantiating, I guess, of the club?
Well, I knew all the people, and I went to meetings like that, and I was active in that way. I mean, I was still pretty young.
Yeah, I was going to say you're still pretty young at that point anyway, but yeah.
But yeah, I was certainly very supportive, and I wrote an article for the first journal about Merlin hawking. I got really involved in Merlin hawking and I got my first one about 1970 when people hadn't been doing it much in America, and there was even, Henry Swain had a couple, but they got ill and died. So I don't know. I don't remember him like going game hawking with them and everything. But my friend Hollis Robertson and I, we got a couple of IS Merlins, and we just went out. We didn't know what we were doing. We'd flown a lot of birds already. I mean, I'd already flown Cooper's hawks and red tails, taking tons of jackrabbits and cottontails. I mean, I was very active as a teenager in that regard. And I had a prairie when I was 16, a passage prairie, and flew her for 6 months and released her. And, so I had a strong background, but this was, and I was really interested. I'd read The Art and Practice of Hawking, E.B. Mitchell, and I just was really infatuated with the idea of flying Merlins. But what do you fly them at? We don't have skylarks here. And we wanted some kind of ringing flight. And we started hunting in a pepper patch. Near where I lived, there was a lot of agricultural land, even in Orange County, when I was coming up. And I had a lot of agricultural land right around where I was flying. I mean, I was flying kestrels before that. Like I had one male who, he was almost Cooper's hawk, like he'd do sneak attacks. There were this rhubarb patch with really long, open air with bunches of sparrows way at the end, and he just dropped down like a Sharpie or something and just go straight toward him, just at ground level in between these rows, and suddenly you suddenly see a flock of sparrows go up, and he'd swoop up in them and he'd nail them, And one time he did that, and all I saw come up were some blackbirds. And I would go running over there, and he had nailed a blackbird, and it was on its back, but it had a hold of him at the base of its tail, and he's trying to walk away with this thing. and this was around the time that movie The Birds came out, Hitchcock's movie. And I ran over there because the blackbirds, when they're flying away, they suddenly turned around and came back to attack my bird. And I'm over there, and they're hovering all around me like in the movie The Birds, and I'm swinging my hawking bag, which was actually just a fishing creel I had, to get those things to go. And then I picked them up. So, he'd taken that, and he took a lot of sparrows, and he took a couple of cowbirds. But that was really exciting. And the bird I had after that, I released it. I was all about releasing birds back then. And I released them basically at the end of, the early fall. And my next one was an IS female kestrel. And I'd been going out hawking a lot with Jeff Sipple, who was really into flying tiercel prairies at doves, mourning doves. And I would be flushing them for him and all that. And I really wanted my next kestrel. I wanted to fly it like he did. And so I got, stoop into the lure, and then I got her waiting on, and she was waiting on just like a little prairie. But then when I started catching sparrows with her and stuff, she became a kestrel, and she just wanted to hover. And I'd go on my bicycle. I didn't have a car. Ride my bicycle down to this dairy where there's a big drainage ditch next to it. And she'd fly down the drainage ditch to these two, I think they were peach trees or something, there was two of them, and they were always full of sparrows, and she'd fly over there and she'd hover about 40 feet above this thing. And I'd run over there picking rocks as I went. And, I'd sometimes take 3 in a row, like wham, and let her eat the head, put her back up. And, she was very deadly.
Nice.
So, and then, like I said, I had 2 or 3 Cooper's hawks and hunting quail and even some rabbits and things. So by the time I got the Merlins, I was really primed to do something different and interesting. So Hollis and I got those birds, and we started flying in this pepper patch near Cypress, California. And it was nice because it was open fields all around, but then a pepper patch. I don't know how many acres, but it was pretty big, but at least there was open country around it. And there were always cowbirds there. And we'd walk out there, and we were flying in a cast, and we'd flush them, and they just go up like starlings and blackbirds, just in a big bunch, circling up higher and higher with our birds after them, And it was amazing. They'd get up there amongst them, and always there'd be some that drop out and come flying down. And, and then they'd catch them on the ground. They usually catch each their own bird, but we always flew them together. And I started doing that experimenting. I'd read in Jack Marvagada's book about this, I think it was an Arab technique of exercising birds by calling them, putting them down on the ground and calling them up above your head for a tidbit. I started doing that with her, and she just, and I do microscopic bits of meat because I could still fly her that day too. And she got so strong, she'd circle around under those flocks, and she'd just be like at the bottom of them, and suddenly she could just whoom, 12 feet up and be in the middle of them. They just panic, and that was very exciting. And she took a couple of doves out in that field, and then they took a lot of what they would call miscellaneous now, because not legal game.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, the incidentals.
yeah. That's the shame of it. Like, in Britain, it's legal to hunt skylarks.
Mm-hmm.
And it's real wonderful. You can write all about it and the technique and that. And because it's the classic prey, they sort of, okay, we've been doing this for 800 years, whatever it is. And so that it's legal to do it. But here we've got interesting kinds of prey that, you really can't talk about.
Sure.
And it's such a shame. I remember once writing an article for Hawkshock and sending it to Will Shore, who was the editor then. And I just had everything. I had all kinds of different, birds, like the kind of stuff a wild bird would catch, And he just edited out all those things, and he just left me with the cowbirds. and I wish I had that manuscript now, just to have it somewhere, give to the Archives of Falconry or something.
Yeah.
But the following year, though, I got another Merlin, and I think she's the first one I've ever heard of that was flown from a waiting on position. And I don't know. I didn't like deliberately do it. It's just like I was walking across a stubble field, and a bunch of mourning doves got up, and she tail chased after them and went way up in the air trying to catch up with them. And it was kind of hopeless, but she broke off. And she just started coming back over me. So she was a couple 100 feet high. And I knew from flying prairies at doves, there's always stragglers in a stubble field. And as my bird was approaching me, I just ran toward her, clapping my hands. And of course, several got up, and she whacked one really hard where feathers just went flying, and then tail chased it all the way to cover and got it. And so, Merlins, they learn faster than other kinds of birds, in my experience. If they've done something and it really works out well, they're all in. And so I flew at that field a lot then. And she just, and I was kind of flying her in higher, I wasn't worried about her being super sharp because she always, and she just had a lot of power, and she'd go up higher and higher and higher. And, she's another one, like my Kessler, she took, sometimes I might only do this once in a season, a bird like that, where I want to see how they'll do. And I usually just try to get 3. And she took 3 doves in a row, just like that Kestrel had with sparrows. And she was a fabulous bird. And then I started flying her at other places from waiting on position and catching some of the birds that I can't talk about. And but,
yeah, sounds like
she was a bird. She got more and more like a wild bird, just such a powerful flyer. And this is before telemetry. And I lost her one day, and then the next day, mid-morning, I'm out there looking and swinging my lure and stuff. And suddenly I see couple of doves flying really high up, and I put my binos on them. And the second one was my Merlin. And she chased this dove all across the sky, and I was swinging my lure, and she came in, because otherwise, if she would have killed it, I never would have found her. But within a week, I had lost her again. I never saw her again. But I had no doubt about her abilities.
Well, it sounds like that your philosophy, which I mean, a lot of other falconers have too, and the whole, being really keen to release and acquire a new bird and all that kind of stuff. It really sounds like that helped build a really solid foundation for you, especially starting so young in all of this.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, on the other hand, I've had a lot of respect for people who have birds for years. And I mean, we were talking about Greg Thomas. He had that red tail that he had at Centerville for, 25, 26 years, the one he called Goss. And that's neat in itself. And I had one peregrine for 14 years, but early on, I don't know if someone told me that's what you're supposed to do, or it was like you fly them, and at the end of the season, let them go.
Yeah, there's something to be said for both. I mean, anybody that's been doing this for any length of time knows sometimes, keeping especially a bird that's being flown regularly in falconry, it's hard, to keep a bird whenever you're flying it like you quote unquote should be, right? And hunting it, there's always something that usually inevitably happens, and being able to keep a bird for that long that you're also actively hunting. I mean, you're either really lucky, really skilled, or a combination of both.
Right. Yeah. And back there in the days before telemetry, I guess it was.
And that's a whole other level of factor in that too. I mean,
I was flying one Passage Jack Merlin. This was another one. After that, I'd fly him from a waiting on position, and I flew him for 4 years before I lost him. So that's when I started actually interviewing birds and things like that. But I remember flying him one time. Like I said, I was before telemetry, but I was with a couple of falconers, and they were good falconers, But there was a long flight he made, and one guy said, "You'll never see him again." I said, "Well, I don't know about that." And I just started walking over the direction he came, swinging my lure, and he came in. So.
Yeah, Merlins especially. I know it's if you're not flying them with telemetry, that can be be a recipe for an easily lost bird for sure. But
or like those old Tundra peregrines we flew and things like that.
Oh yeah. I mean, long wings in general, if you don't fly them with telemetry, you usually end up saying bye-bye sooner than later to a lot of them. At least that's been, what I've seen, but
But what's funny, speaking of, not telemetry, but the GPS units, I finally got one of those when I was flying this female peregrine, but I'd had that Tiercel peregrine for years and took a lot of ducks with them. And, people would sometimes there's people who are visiting the lab of ornithology from different countries, and they'd hear I had a bird and want to go out and see me fly ducks with them or something. And, so I'd check the pond. Oh, there's some mallards or something. And he'd take off. And a lot of times he'd be gone for 20 minutes, and people go, "Well, aren't you going to go looking for him and all that?" And I said, "No, he's just doing the peregrine thing, no big deal." And, finally, he'd come back really high and get a great flight. And then I had this female peregrine I was flying just a few years ago. She was actually one I was rehabbing, but I'd gotten one of those GPS units, and she flew off just like he used to do. But I'm looking at my phone, and she says she's 1,750 feet high, and she's going in a straight direction. She's already 6 miles away. I'm going, "Oh, God." So I jump in my car and I haul ass all the way over there, and even beyond it. And I finally stop and get out, and look at my phone again. She's waiting on right above where I was. Where'd you go? So that's the downside. tend
Yeah.
not to have as much faith in your birds sometimes.
No, and I think that people start to become too reliant on that also, and they're missing out in the moment a lot, staring into the screen sometimes, and it also it there's a lot to be said for the traditional ways of tracking birds too that a lot of people don't seem to be taught anymore. Looking for the other telltale signs.
Yeah.
Crows raising hell and bombing a certain spot, or other birds, raising hell, and different things like that. And I think that's suffered some too, and that knowledge getting passed on with the advent of a lot of newer technology. And the other thing about GPS too, it's still comedic to me how many people get it, don't watch the tutorial videos, and don't know how to use it, and then they go and just use it, and it doesn't work out for them, and they lose both their expensive transmitter and their bird, and then they want to blame it on Marshall or anybody else but themselves. It just cracks me up hearing that.
It helps if you know what you're doing, for sure.
I mean, anybody that gets GPS, especially, I always tell them, look, if you really want to get comfortable with it, just take a transmitter out somewhere and practice with it for a while first. And,
right.
And watch the friggin' tutorial videos first, for God's sake, please. So, but anyway,
it's funny. I finally got one because, I was flying this bird, and it's real hilly around here. So you might be like a big open farm field or something with a pond that's got ducks on it or whatever. But if your bird flies over the hill, you lose that signal really quickly. And one time I was flying this female peregrine, and I drove around a little. I couldn't get a signal. What am I going to do? Oh, so I drove over to the Ithaca airport, and there's like this local flying club, private pilots. And I just went in there and kind of begged, hey, can someone take me up? So I explained the thing. And so I'm up there, and they didn't like me duct taping the antenna on the strut of the plane. But, the guy took me up there, and we flew, and my bird was like 12 miles away. I picked up a signal, and they flew me back, and I got in my car, and I just thought, well, I should get one of those GPS units. Maybe I won't have to do that.
Yeah, for
but I can beg though. I have no shame.
Well, yeah, I mean, sometimes it helps to be able to swallow what ego you have and pride, and ask for the directions, so to speak. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, and I do know though the GPS though, having the if you got a long wing, having the turbo and the omni antenna, it can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like you're another one of these guys though that had the good fortune to be able to build a really wide, nice, falconry foundation at a really young age, and sounds like you were fortunate to be able to have that.
Yeah.
Were you then inspired from that experience early on to then get into, the profession that you've been in, and what kind of led to that?
It was a very interesting coincidence that I went to Centerville in 1966, which was just a year after, just a year after they had the Peregrine Falcon Conference in Madison, Wisconsin, that Joe Hickey set up. And a good percentage of people who presented papers there and participated, they were falconers. And a lot of them were at Centerville. And it was, for most of them, it was the first time they'd gotten together since the Madison Conference. And Don Hunter, who lived in Centerville, he'd been there, and he was one that came up with the idea of starting an organization called the Raptor Research Foundation. And like right after that Madison conference ended, they had a little meeting with he and Tom Cade and several other people, and that's when they formed the Raptor Research Foundation. And so at Centerville, they had the second meeting of that group. And we were, all of us who were at the meet were invited to attend that meeting. And they just picked up on the same things they've been talking about at Madison. And from what I've heard of Madison, it was a scientific conference unlike any other. Usually there are people having little side discussions out in the hallway and this and that, and not paying attention to everything. And this one, everyone was there, and they were hanging on the edge of their seats, and it was just an amazing thing. And they really didn't know for sure what was causing the peregrine numbers to crash. But Joe Hickey had studied peregrines extensively in the late 1930s, early 40s, wrote an important paper in 1942, and knew a lot about the birds in the Northeast. And he sent Dan Berger and another person, and Dan was a falconer, sent him all over the East. Like, he spent 3 months driving an old Volkswagen bus, and went to 133 eyries, and not one of them was active. And that was just a shock. That's why he came back and told Hickey that, and that's why he started the conference, put it together. Like, we got to find out what's happening. Of course, DDT was suspected, but no one knew for sure, and not everyone agreed. I mean, even like Frank Beebe, he thought it was because the passenger pigeons became extinct and the eastern peregrines dropping away, that was like a delayed feature. I mean, it was a result. And because where he was in British Columbia, I mean, those Peel's falcons were fine, and but they weren't eating the kind of prey that tends to have DDT in it. I mean, they were catching seabirds, murrelets, and things. So, but that was interesting, and he was at Centerville, and a lot of other people, and they were having the same arguments, the same discussions. And another thing at Madison, it was Derek Radcliffe, who was British, not a falconer, but he's the one who really kind of proved that Britain, it was because of DDT. He had places, look, here's a map of where the peregrines are gone now, and here's a map of where they've been spraying DDT, and he'd have these two slides and stick them together in the slide projector, and they were identical, And Hickey really cast a wide net. He even got people from the pesticide industry, and who are presenting, oh, this couldn't possibly be what's going on. I mean, the maybe one or two nests, but not what's going on here. And but they no way. But by the end of that, they were sure that that's what was happening.
Yeah. I've heard the same argument back and forth between multiple people, and it was more one versus the other, and the populations here are okay. Why are they okay here but not here? But yet, right. I've heard that same. I mean, where were you at the time on that perspective then, and where have you been on it personally, for a long time leading up to now with all of that from your point of view?
Well, I mean, living in California, there were hardly any peregrines anymore. And although, they were still nesting in the western states, but nothing like they had been, Mm-hmm. And, but I didn't know they were in bad shape. I mean, I was a 16-year-old kid. Mm-hmm. And, so I'm hearing all this stuff and really taking it in, and there are a lot of, Heinz Meng was there, who was really the first scientist that got some breeding in captivity. With Peels, they were too. But at that point, he'd gotten some tundra birds, and we're trying to breed intermediate passage tundras. He was trying to get them to breed, and it's like, well, they didn't know then that you really need to get ISs, ones that are used to, have lived in captivity all their lives. And, mm-hmm. But then he was the first one who started double and triple clutching, and he gave birds to Cade, and Tom Cade wasn't at Centerville, but a lot of other people were, like Jim Weaver, like I mentioned, and he was really the most important person in the Cornell project. He ran that thing.
Yeah.
He wasn't originally going to do that. He just happened to, he was curious about what was going on at Cornell. And he and a friend went over there and started checking out the hawk barn and all that. And there were things he didn't like. They had wooden dowels for the bars on, some of them had broken and stuff. And so, no, you need to get round metal ones here and all. So and we need this kind of perch for the ledges. And next thing you know, he started running the project. He moved there and was there for years. So,
yeah, no, that's interesting stuff. I
love Jim Anderson was there, and later I'd spent time with him in Greenland, and lots of great people.
I love hearing about those kind of stories, and there's so many kind of a lot of falconers, especially nowadays, would consider to be quote unquote legendary type figures that did so much for the early beginnings and the conservation aspect, especially for what we do, and it's neat always hearing about kind of the early startup days of all of these things that happened that were so influential in what we have now. So, yeah. I mean, if you want, by all means, anything you want to elaborate on with any of those memories that you have from those early days and stuff, please feel free to share. And I'll just sit here and continue to shut up and let you, share as many of those recountings as you can, because that's what this is all about. So,
yeah, well, I started participating in, surveys like prairie falcons and peregrines, trying to find the nests. But actually when I was in college, at first I was really interested in being a fiction writer. That was my thing. But I sort of, I knew a couple of people who were journalists, and I sort of admired the way, if they had a deadline, they could just sit down on the typewriter and pound something out, and writer's block be damned. And that was admirable. So I started taking some journalism courses, and I don't know, coming from an English major background, I sort of really excelled at it. And next thing you know, I'm on the staff of the magazine and all that. And I thought I want to do an article about what's going on with peregrine. And I knew at UC Santa Cruz, they had started a project, the Santa Cruz Predatory Bird Research Group. And I'd met Brian Walton before, who headed it. And so I got in touch with him. And I got a grant from Reader's Digest, like a student grant, a few $100 for my expenses to go to Santa Cruz. Yeah, it was only about a 4-hour drive, but so I went out there and hung out with those guys, and I loved it, and I wrote an article about it for the magazine, and it won a huge national, it won a couple of real big awards, but one of them was this Hearst Foundation journalism, fellowship. And I just thought, wow, that's amazing. So, suddenly I reached the point where I had enough credits in journalism and all that. I could get a degree in magazine journalism right now, or I could go another semester and get my English degree. And so I bailed. I took the master's degree. I mean the bachelor's degree in magazine journalism, but I did feel guilty a couple of years later and come back and get a master's in English. But that's another story. But anyway, right after I graduated, I went up to Santa Cruz and worked at the project, and I was. At first living in, I don't know if you've ever seen or anything about it, but it's in a big rock quarry, an old, 100-year-old rock quarry right on the campus of, UC Santa Cruz. And at first I was just living in I had an international travel all, and I was just living in that and kind of, working on the things during the day and protecting the thing at night. And John Schmidt, the bird artist, he worked there too. And he was in a trailer. And I had a Merlin at the time then. I had a Jack Merlin I was flying, but it was really inspiring to me. And eventually Merlin Felton was a real good falconer. He was working there too. And later, Merlin and I moved in with Danny Verrier and his family, who's also a good falconer who worked at the Predatory Bird Group. And so that was really an exciting time in my life. But then I got an offer from a magazine, a pretty decent sized magazine, wanting me to work there as an editor, and I was really torn. And I talked to Brian Walton about it, and he said, we really value you here, the things you do and all that, but you can do a lot more for the birds and conservation if you become an important journalist or something. So he thought I should go. And I did. And I still have mixed feelings about it, but I think it worked out well. Over the years, I've gotten to report on a lot of interesting stuff. I've gone on 2 trips to Greenland with the Peregrine Fund and with Tom Cade on one of them, and been to Iceland, climbing a gyrfalcon nest, banding them, and lots of other stuff, Africa, South America, the Arctic, and just writing about them and writing books and things. And it's been an exciting life. Yeah, it's nice when there's opportunities,
Oh yeah.
I want to do it all, but
I'm in the same boat right there with you. Whenever I set off early on, I was going to be a musician and, touring musician and a producer and all that. And then I fell into working in healthcare. And then later on, it was of all things, a falconry podcast ended up taking me on tour more than anything else, so I get it. Sometimes you stumble into opportunities and you just kind of got to be in a position to be able to do them whenever they come. So, were you juggling anything at that point in time, or any of those points in time whenever you were traveling around everywhere and stuff? Did you have to juggle, falconry plus that, plus family, plus other things too? Or?
Yeah. Even just like the day-to-day thing, because we had 4 kids, and it was so. They were they were extremely important, but I sort of like about 9:30 at night, I said, okay, well, now I'm going to work on this book project or this other project. And I might go to 12:30, and then I'd get up early, put my Peregrine in the car. I'd drive around, check several local ponds, because it's finally, when I first came here, well, mourning doves aren't even legal game in New York. It's like considered a songbird. So, because that's what I like to hunt often in California, and some ducks, but not as much. But I started here, I was flying at crows, like the first half of one season with this IS Tiercel Peregrine I had. And I'd get some nice flights, but it being like there are trees, a lot of trees around, and you'd be in an open field and have a big flight in the sky, and they could always plummet into the trees right at the last second. And I only took a couple. And in fact, one of them got away when I was making in, so I really only took one. But one day, he flew all over the sky after these crows, and then came back over. They got away, and he came back over, and I knew there was a pond over there. I didn't know if there were any ducks on it at that point or not. I went over there, and there were, and I flushed them. And he took a mallard. I mean, that's one thing. We had mostly larger ducks here. Most of the things he took were like mallards, black ducks, even common merganser, that kind of thing. And occasionally you might see a wood duck or a hooded merganser or something smaller, but it was a tough thing for a Tiercel, but he was aggressive. But anyway, back to my point originally. So I'd go out and scout these ponds, and there were about 5 or 6 ones spread out over a several mile area. And then I'd come in to work. I'd have my bird in the back of my truck, and sort of establish that I'm here. Hang out for a couple hours doing editorial stuff, and then slip away, go fly my bird that ducks, maybe catch one, maybe not, and come back with my bird fed up in my back of my car, and do a little more work, then take my bird home at lunchtime, which is about only like less than 10 minutes away from the lab of ornithology. And so that you can see that's a real full thing. And then later going on trips, it became a little harder. I mean, it was easier if my bird was molting and I just had him in a chamber or something. But even sometimes when, when it was during the flying season and I had to leave for 10 days or something, I'd put him in the chamber and my wife would feed him, just put food in for him every day.
Yeah.
And so those were some difficult times. And, my wife and I hardly ever got to go on trips together, which is, it's always like someone had to stay with the dogs and the animals. And she was a travel writer, so she was always going on trips to faraway places. And then she'd get home and I'd go somewhere and do something. And okay, we got to go to Alaska a couple of times, and Peru, and a few things, but I don't know, South Georgia Island, and Tierra del Fuego, and all that. But for the most part, we really had to split up that.
Yeah, that's the big crux of what we do. Unfortunately, these dealing with living organisms as as our hunting buddies instead of just the gun that we can put away in the off season. That's always a
well,
challenge.
That's right. Yeah. You can clean off your gun really nicely and put it away in a warm place, and it's good. It's not like that.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I having my situation changed so much over the last year, and now living by myself with pretty much myself it's me, myself, and I now. So I'm running into a lot of those challenges too. Like I'm having to rely a lot on my 17-year-old son to come over and feed animals and stuff if I have to go out of town for a few days or do this, that, and the other. And it's just like, man, it can really seem a lot of times like you're fighting a losing battle, if you don't have somebody there all the time with you that can help, manage everything. So it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah.
That's why I always like to ask that question, because I always like hearing how other people juggled it, doing, having busy careers and everything else too. So.
Yep.
Yeah. But,
do what you can.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just survival mode, that's, but, I mean, that's, out of curiosity, this is another question that I like asking folks like yourself too, that have had the fortunate ability to be able to travel and see so many places and stuff. But I mean, I know I get asked sometimes what my favorite place has been that I've, visited or had experiences at and stuff. And what's been yours? I mean, have you had a favorite place that you that you've been to, or, what's been your favorite place that's taken you in your travels?
It'd be hard for me to say one place. I mean, I love Greenland, and the things I've done there, going to white gyrfalcon nests and things, and I love Iceland. I love the people, and just going out, stopping at farmhouses in the middle of the night and talk. Yeah, I guess sometimes you have to go through farmland to get out to where the cliffs are for the gyrfalcons, and people inviting you in and drinking coffee with you and all that. But I really love England. I mean, I am English, and I'm from Yorkshire, and I love there, and I love up along Hadrian's Wall, and I've really, in Scotland, I've had some great times, flying with British falconers, Roger Upton and his son Mark, and Stephen Frank.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some amazing times there.
Nice.
John Loft, who passed away recently, he was a good friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Another Merlin freak.
Yeah, he wrote Merlin for me, right?
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that everybody still kind of leans, at least for certain things. I mean, I do agree with you 100% that like sometimes you kind of have to divvy up your preferences in certain categories too. Like, well, if it's pertaining to this
Right.
was my favorite place, but if it pertains to this over here, that was my favorite place. And sometimes you have to kind of categorize them too a little bit. But I know as far as just overall, like for me, as far as scenery, landscape, and just overall, just all the different types of scenery and things I like in one kind of area. I know South Africa's been, my favorite, like the Cape area so far, that's kind of been one of my faves, but
I love South Africa too. I mean, that whole, like the Cape Town and all that area, and
yep.
Kruger, and lots of places. I've gone to the wineries too, done that, but also gone
for
out,
sure,
photographed elephants and things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a wildlife photographer too, so I've went all over there doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and as far as like specific to falconry and like hawking, I mean, what's been your favorite type of hawking, and where has been your favorite place for hawking? Well,
I guess, you might have noticed from what I talked about, my background and stuff, it's real diverse. And I've flown several red tails successfully, getting Jackson cottontails, and several kestrels, several merlins, Cooper's hawks. I've had I think 5 Cooper's hawks, but they're mostly back then, but I took a lot of game with them. And so I was really active in it, and I enjoyed it. But it's hard to compare that to a peregrine. It's a different sport almost,
Mm-hmm.
Or Merlin's peregrine. And I've never flown a gyrfalcon, but they're interesting to watch. I think my favorites are like Merlins and peregrines, just for various reasons. I like the way a peregrine looks, like an adult peregrine. They're so beautiful. And such amazing flight. But then I love prairies too. They are such hard-hitting birds, and they're serious. Peregrines are more I don't want to say dainty, but it's a different, really different.
Finesse.
Yeah. But I love them both. I love them all.
Yeah.
See, you probably tell I have trouble really saying this is my favorite thing, because that makes the other things not seem as important or something. And I don't want to do that.
Well, the way I look at it is you can love everything, but there's always that one thing though, usually, that you love just that a little bit more sometimes. I mean, it may not even be by a whole lot, but I mean, there's always a little bit of either a bias or preference that most falconers I've found tend to have. And, I mean, just talking to you and just this course of conversation so far, it feels like, you would lean more towards, the Merlins more than anything, but it seems like you have.
Yeah, it's like that. I'd say the Merlins and peregrines.
Just kind of neck and neck. Yeah. I gotcha. And as far as where though, like if you had to choose right now, you could only ever practice falconry with either Merlins or peregrines in any part of the world, you could wave a magic wand. Where would you have a preference in hawking those particular species?
Well, I mean, it'd be nice to go back to Britain and fly a Merlin at Skylarks. I mean, that'd be kind of fun for me. I mean, that's yeah.
And geographically, we're at
probably out in the Yorkshire moors or something, my homeland.
Gotcha.
But when you say favorite place in the world, it's probably like the British Isles, because I like Ireland too.
Okay.
And I mean, and my family way back from Ireland. I think my great grandfather was born in Ireland and joined the Royal Marines and ended up living in Plymouth later, and it's where my grandfather and my father were born.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Ireland and a few other Ireland and Scotland are still on
Ireland,
my bucket
Scotland,
list.
And really, you know, the Wiltshire Downs down more southerly part of. I mean, I love that. You know, Stonehenge and all those neat places down there. And I love the fact that it's so ancient. I mean, there's lots of Roman ruins around, like Hadrian's Wall and Vindolanda and various places. But there's also, you know, earlier stuff than that, and Anglo-Saxon and Picts, and you know, all those. You know,
sure. Well, and then when
it's
I
an
was
ancient place.
Oh yeah, definitely. And when I was fortunate enough to be able to do, you know, the episodes that I recorded over primarily in England, yeah, I mean, it definitely made me want that much more to be able to check Ireland and Scotland off the bucket list of places to go. But I was fortunate enough to be able to see Stonehenge, and that's what I love about Europe in general. Other parts of Europe in general is, you know, all the history. I mean, it's just amazing. Yeah. You know, and all the different countries in Europe, and it has a different feel and energy. It just feels, I don't know, very unique. You know,
when I was working on that book about Frederick II, you know, I got to travel all over Italy and the place where he was born and where he died, and out to Palermo where his, sarcophagus was, and that was amazing to me.
Well, talk a little bit more about that, because I mean, that had to be just a tremendous amount of research and just legwork, right? I mean, writing any kind of book is, but whenever you're trying to be historically accurate, especially when you're writing about a particular figure in history, that's got to be a lot of work.
Yeah, and I had an interesting background with him. I don't know, when I was about 12 and I was getting interested in falconry, the only book they had in the local library was that Art of Falconry, you know, that translation of De Art Venandi Cum Avibus. And I was determined I'm going to read this from cover to cover, and I'm going to go back and read some stuff more than once. And I just kept checking it out again and again. And the librarian, about the third or fourth time, she says, well, you can't just keep checking this book out. You know, someone else might want to read it. And I showed her the front of the thing. I said, look, I'm the only person who's checked this out in the last 15 years. And so she sort of informally let me just keep that book for about a year. And I really read it, you know. And it was then I was flying my Tiercel Peregrine years later. It was when I lived here. And I've lived here since 1990. I got a job at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology as the editor-in-chief of Living Bird magazine, and that was where Tom Cade had his office. Unfortunately, they were leaving as I got. I mean, they you know, Jim Weaver and all those people, they were just leaving, but everyone knew those, and it was like, so I just, so anyway, back to the Frederick thing. I was out here flying my bird and caught a black duck, and I'm sitting there letting him eat it, and I suddenly realized this was Frederick's birthday, and I thought, God, I should write a book. I should write a book about him. I'd already written 3 books, and the one before that had been really successful. Like the one I wrote about the ivory-billed woodpecker, the grail bird, it was like a bestseller, and so I could get an advance on just about anything I wanted at that point. I wish it were still so, but
times have changed.
So I put together this big proposal, and the publisher went with it. You know, gave me a really huge, you know, advance, which helped to pay for everything I wanted to do. And so, and I started by, it was sort of like seeing other falconers too. I spent, a couple of months in Britain and going out with a lot of the well-known hawkers there, and that kind of thing. But and I also went to the NAFA meet, which was in Kearney, and it was an IAF combination meet, just like the one they had a couple of years ago. But this was, I think, in 2006, and it was like that was like the United Nations or something. It was so amazing. And and during that meet, a wealthy Arab falconer, he wanted people to be able to see the Archives of Falconry, that they put this wing in it that was about Arab falconry, and even had wax figures, Arabs in a tent with their falcons, and it's really amazing. And they wanted people to see it, so they hired a jet and said everyone at the meet who wants to can go fly to Boise, Idaho. So, and my wife was with me in that too, and so that was really fun. So we went there. They had like 300 people on this plane, and it didn't cost a dime. And we were giving us wine to drink and stuff. It was like heaven. And,
wow.
Yeah. So eventually, I started going to Italy, and I went to this where he was born, out in this marketplace town. I think his mother was traveling from some, and his father was the emperor. So, so I went to the place where he was born, and I went to several of his castles, and Castle del Monte. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Like it has even had peregrines nesting on it before, but it's like this 8-sided structure. Really amazing, because he was kind of a genius, like an architect and historian and ornithologist. I mean, that Art of Falconry is an ornithological text too. I mean, he talks about migrant birds at a time when people didn't even know about migration. They thought birds probably burrowed into the side of a riverbed and hibernated or something. They didn't know they flew, and he had stuff about migration there, But so I just historically he was just such an amazing figure, and he had trouble with the Pope at the time, because the Pope had sent him on a crusade to the Holy Land, and he actually really respected Arabs, their culture, and the mathematics, everything about it, and the falconry. Hoods had come from there, and. So instead of going to war with them, he set up this truce, like a 10-year truce. And the Pope was so angry that he sent an army against him. But, Frederick pushed it back, and the Pope had to flee from Rome for a while. So, really,
yeah,
it's all very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, he's considered the more or less declared the Antichrist a couple times
or
whatever.
Times. Excommunicated a couple of times. And,
yeah.
And I went to the place where he died. He was only in his 50s when he died, early 50s. And, then I went to the place where he'd laid in state, and there was a little museum, and I don't speak Italian. I speak a little French, and sometimes with people I'd be, if they knew a little French, we'd both be doing broken French to try to communicate. But I didn't know any Italian, so I was trying to ask. I want to go to this throne room. I know it's in here somewhere, and they're just kind of shrugging their shoulders. And I just started walking around there, upstairs and around, like in the courtyard, trying doorknobs. I open this one, and I see it in there, the throne with falcon sculptures on it and everything. And it was just amazing. And that's where he lay in state for the last time on the Italian mainland. And I have to confess, I sat on his throne.
Well, of course you did. Why would you go all that way and
I
not?
Know. But I'd even gone to a place where a funeral procession had gone by, and I read what had been written about it by a person who witnessed it there, and talking about all of his Saracen. He had Arab guards, these Saracens, and how they were weeping and following the funeral bier. And I stood right in the place where that happened, and then I was in here, and actually at that point I got really, really depressed. God, this is, but then I went down and went across on a ferry to Sicily and drove up all the way to Palermo. And there was something, and I had this idea in my head. I had a couple of falcon bells, and I wanted to put them on his, sarcophagus or in front of it or something. It's a vision I had, but I get there and there's some kind of big happening at the thing. I mean, tons of people, some dressed in medieval garb, and soldiers with plumed hats, and I just go, what is going on here? And I was waiting by one door, and finally it opened, and I just slipped in. It was like when I was a kid, I used to slip into rock concerts all the time and things like that. So all the great stars didn't have enough money to pay, But so I'm walking up and down, going, and I finally see this red mahogany sarcophagus, and I go over there, and there are fresh flowers on it. Like, people still put flowers by his thing, And so I went over there and hung out for a while, and then I slipped my bells in there, and then I left. And of course, I don't know. I was trying to figure out later. I wonder what happened to those bells. Was it one of these things like, oh, the miracle of the bells, and they remember it forever? They thought more likely some guy swept it up in the dustbin with the dead flowers later.
Probably, yeah.
But
that sounds like an incredible trip, man.
And then I got stuck in a hopeless traffic jam trying to get out of Palermo. Insane. Everyone honking, like it doesn't do any good. I mean, there are these circular things and cars 5 or 6 wide, and they're just going, like it does any good,
I am the worst person to get an opinion about driving in Italy, period. I did it one time, and I will never do it again. I drove through Milan and, up down close to Venice, and, before we got on the ferry to go to Venice. Never again. It was one of the worst. I have never experienced road rage like I have driving in those parts of Italy. And I've never experienced people who are so insane that they will pull out in front of you on bikes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just, I was just,
yeah.
I almost just didn't stop a couple times. I was just like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I'm sure probably at least 20 of these people get run over every day. I'm not sure they're going to be missed or even noticed, so I don't know. But anyway, well, and so, I mean, how long overall then did it take you to finish the book after you did all your research and your trips and stuff?
For a year after doing the trips. Yeah. I used to just bear down, I need these several months to do everything, the travel involved. And yeah, it's like 2 years total probably. But yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I actually, all my stuff got robbed too, camera, computer, all that, it was typical Italy. And I ended up, just with the shirt on my back, coming home. It was in December, I think, and kind of. Fortunately, it was raining, not snowing, but I think I had a couple things in a paper bag, and that, But yeah.
Jeez. Well, and I'm. That would be enough right there to throw you in a whole other state of depression. Just all that material, and then just gone. And how did you recover from that? I mean, did you have to start from scratch, or did you have anything?
No, because I had other stuff. I had hard copy back home and a lot of stuff.
Okay.
Different computers, but I mean, there were sad things. Like I had a lot of pictures on that. My daughter was a real great soccer player, and I had pictures of her, and a lot of them lost. That was before people were having a external hard drive and
clouds and stuff. Yeah.
So whatever was on that computer was lost. And I took a lot of neat pictures in Italy. Really, I really loved the pictures I got there, and they're all gone because my camera got stolen. Everything got stolen. Yeah.
Yeah, that would suck. Goes without saying.
I had to go to a police station and hang around for hours. Well, Anyway.
Yeah, well, you're here.
You're going to make me depressed if I think back on that.
We don't have to talk about it anymore. That's fine. We can move on to the next topic, if you'd like also. But I mean, just overall, I guess, this would be a good time then to just talk a little bit about what your overall experience has been like. What's been your favorite aspect about, this career and this job path that you chose?
Well, I was never really doing boring stuff, I guess, and even when I'd come back and be working on stuff, writing's exciting to me too. And so is research. So the whole thing, I was never bored.
Yeah. Well, and the whole time that so refresh my memory again, how many collective years have you worked that job then, or that profession?
Well, I was at Living Bird magazine in the Lab of Ornithology for 26 years.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'd been on the startup crew of Wild Bird magazine before that in Southern California, and I'd been at Western Outdoors magazine, and a couple of newspapers.
Okay.
So, it's a long time. Some of those were only a couple of years or here and there, but yeah. And I did a lot of other stuff when I was in my 20s. I didn't go like straight to college from high school. I worked on a commercial fishing boat, fishing swordfish, and I went to worked on a farm growing alfalfa and a lot of and when I was a teenager I worked a lot in factories. Like after my family broke up, I was trying to help earn money for my family and working graveyard shift at factories and things.
Yeah. Well, and
it's funny, like my friend Hollis Roberts, we were both kind of in the same boat in a lot of ways and flying red tails together at one point, and we would work at the same factory graveyard shift, and so we'd get off work about 6 a.m., go get our birds and go hawking. You kind of get your second wind, go catch a few rabbits, and I don't know when we ever slept.
Oh, I can relate to that for sure. I've worked night shift for a long time, and I've sacrificed a lot of sleep for some bunny rabbits. That's for sure.
Yeah,
I get it. And as far as just your writing career and like the books that you've written, and I'm sure that a question like this would be kind of the equivalent of, well, what is your favorite type of bird to fly? Would be the kind of up there with that difficulty of a question to answer. But was there did you feel like any extra source of gratification, or, did you have more fun writing, one type or one of your books more than the others? And I guess for the people listening that aren't familiar with with the books that you've written, why don't you just go ahead and give kind of like a brief synopsis of the books that you've written and stuff too, so people are aware of that also.
Well, my first book was Wild Bird Photography, came out in the early 1990s, and it's just like like the title, but this was at a time when there wasn't autofocus and it was film, slide film and all that. So, but I enjoyed it. I've written lots of photography columns for a couple of different magazines and things. So it was sort of a compilation of that kind of thing. And then I wrote Parts Unknown. I came out in 2001, and I think my publication date was like September 11th, and I think that kind of hurt the book.
Yeah, there's some Murphy's Law there for sure.
Yeah. And that one had a lot of my trips to Greenland and Iceland and different places, a lot of raptor stuff. And a lot of those stuff I'd written in other places and stuff, but they tend to be long articles, and they put a lot of my photos in, and it had a really nice. I'd taken a really nice picture of a white gyrfalcon that they used on the cover, and there's an interesting story behind that one. I was, in Greenland, and with Bill Burnham, we took a little Zodiac and went down along to where this gyrfalcon eyrie was, and I wanted to try to go up there even with it. So I had a heavy tripod and a 500 millimeter lens and camera and all that. And we tied off down below and and on the way up, it was like you're just grabbing onto these tussock grass kind of things it was almost like a fly going up a wall. It was weird. It was insane to do it, really, in a way. And unfortunately, at one point, Bill took my tripod, so at least I did. So that was very good. And so I got all the way up there, and it was a young white gyrfalcon. It was hard penned, but it was sitting there, and it was sort of half in darkness and half in light. So I had to sit up there for about an hour and a half till the sun was right, and then I got some really nice shots of it. But then going down was 20 times harder than coming up. I mean, because when you're climbing, it's different. You're going up, but going down, oh shit, if you fell, that water is really cold. It's in the low 30s, and you're dead basically. You go plummeting down there, and so that was kind of scary. But
It's just a little, probably.
I had a few decent adventures like that in Greenland.
Man, that's nuts. Yeah, I mean, the whole height thing in particular is one thing, but then knowing that, you're not just going to necessarily, die on impact. If you fall into that, you're going to freeze to death also. It's
yeah. I used to do some crazy thing climbing to get, and it was usually to get pictures. I've got some pictures in Iceland of Olafur Nielsen, who was the Icelandic scientist who was studying the gyrfalcons there. He'd actually studied at Cornell with Tom Cade too,
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got pictures of him where he's down on this cliff with a rope, and there's the gyrfalcons there, and there's a wild one flying by him and stuff, and close-up shots. Well, I didn't have a rope in the helmet or something. I free climbed to get to where I could get those pictures. And I look at those now and think, that's insane.
Oh man,
that's really insane.
Oh geez, it's actually, we're gonna have to start talking about something else also. That's giving me anxiety just thinking about it.
Luckily, I had a good life insurance policy at that point. So
oh well, that's good.
The kids would have taken care of it.
Somebody would have benefited, Yeah. Jeez, man. Well, and I guess you mentioned Tom Cade, and I wouldn't want to end this podcast without at least getting a few of your favorite memories, possibly, or I mean, you've had the chance to be around a lot of very influential falconers, from back in the day, and I am curious, what some of your favorite memories are of your interactions with them, and maybe just some recollections, or I mean, from what you can remember as to kind of things that were impactful on you, or even just some of your more favorite fond memories of some of those interactions with them.
Well, I mean, in general, Tom Cade actually had a really good sense of humor, and I appreciated that. And I listened to other interviews with him, and he's very serious, and I did an interview with him myself when he came to Cornell, I think it was for the 100th anniversary of the lab Ornithology, or so. I forget what it was, but I got him in the studio there and interviewed him, and he had a sense of humor there, and he was great, and it was just I was really glad to have gotten that, because I all the other things I hear where he's getting interviewed, he's just dead serious, and 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 actually after he passed away, I wrote a piece about him for Audubon, and I gave them that recording and they put it up on their website, and so I was glad to have gotten that there.
Well, that's cool. I mean, that's nice getting a chance to know and see a different perspective and side of people than what everybody else kind of gets from, those secondary interactions, whether it be recordings or, whatever the case is. But, what about some of these other guys? You mentioned like Jim Weaver and some of these other guys that you had a chance to be around at some of those NAFA meets and stuff. Do you have any, fond memories or recollections from those times too? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was amazing hanging out with those guys in Centerville, and he had a couple of peregrines then, an Ias Tiercel and an intermediate female, and the female was a really, really excellent pheasant hawk, but the Tiercel, it was like it'd go up a zillion feet, and all the it's all like I love Tiercel peregrines. My first peregrine was a Tiercel, and I've had a couple more since, but that's the really when I first saw the difference in just the kind of the quicker wing beat and the high pitches they go to, and the vertical stoops, and so
yeah, well, I mean, I think that, as far as it, do you have anything else then that you feel like is kind of noteworthy to, share as far as, I don't know, do you feel like you have anything else that's worth, mentioning or kind of getting on record before we, kind of start to wind down here? I mean, you've already been nice enough to give me like an hour and a half of your time already. So I'm,
wow, that much already.
Oh yeah.
I hope you got enough to work with there.
Oh, I got plenty to work with. This is going to be great.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, is there anything else that you can think of that's, that, I mean, usually I like to end on, with a favorite hunting story or two and a piece of advice, but if there's anything else that you want to mention or
one person who was really important in my life as a falconer and as a human is Jeff Sipple. And I first met him when I was probably 12, 13 years old, and he was always really almost like an older brother. He's about 10 years older than me, and he already had a wife and a couple of toddler kids when I met him, and over the years we got to do a lot of interesting stuff together, and he really tried to help with the peregrines too. He would do surveys, and last summer I went to I happened to be in California, and it was right. He was going to have his 85th birthday the next day, and his kid. It was like the middle of the week, and his kids were going to celebrate with him that weekend or something. So it was his 85th birthday, and he was just alone. And I said, "Hey, well, let's go out. Let's go to some nests and stuff." We started talking, and there's a nest. There are so many nests in California now. It's ridiculous. I mean, when I was at Santa Cruz Predatory Bird, we knew of 2, and now there are dozens, all over. I think LA Harbor has 6 of them, or I mean, they're on cranes and bridges and buildings. But there are also a ton of natural eyries, which I really love. And we decided we're going to go out by Point Furman, which is near San Pedro, and he had actually, at one point, he'd gotten, someone gave him a peregrine that had been hit by a car or something. And he rehabbed it just for a couple of weeks. It wasn't really hurt bad, but it was banded. And he released it, I think, by Bolsa Chica Refuge. And it ended up year or two later, it was the female. It was nesting at Point Furman, and she nested there for years. And so we went out there, and there were some ISs flying around. I got a nice picture of one of them, and probably the descendants of that bird, from the 19.
Nice.
Yeah, so that made me feel good, and so he was a great falconer too. So many good birds he had, and we flew together forever.
Well, yeah, it always seems like there's a couple of falconers that falconers usually end up completely going solo, or it seems like there's one or two that they end up kind of being almost intertwined with to a certain degree. And
we had a falconry club. It was actually started by Jack Hagan, who was also a really good friend of mine, and it was Santa Ana Valley Hawking Club, and Jeff did the artwork for it, with a peregrine and a goshawk, and that became the California Hawking Club logo. It was first Santa Ana Valley. We even had sweatshirts and stuff, but the meetings would often be at Jack Hagan's house in Santa Ana, and but then later they started being at Jeff's house a lot, and I lived really close to there. It was walking distance, like a mile and a half or two, and boy, such an interesting group of people went through there too.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can't imagine a group of falconers in particular just, not being an interesting bunch, but especially some of those guys for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, no, that's killer. There's a lot of times where I wonder what it would have been like to have, there's some of these guys that I said, guys like yourself that I love talking to, because they've kind of seen the highs and the lows, and the highs and the lows again, and just kind of the progression of how everything has come. And, guys like myself that have gotten in kind of on the back end of everything, I'll always be envious of how things, kind of were to a degree, when there was so many places to fly and so much game and stuff. But even though there wasn't necessarily the access to the birds that we have now, but anyway, well, you've already shared a lot of great stories and stuff. I mean, if you have a particular favorite, hawking story or memory that you'd like to share, I mean, I know that's another one of those that's going to be probably really tough for you to kind of narrow down to just one or two, but you want to feel free to share that, and then piece of advice, and we can wrap this up for the day.
Well, I can tell you one kind of embarrassing story.
Okay, by all means.
My tiercel peregrine McDuff, and this was it was winter. There was snow on the ground, and there was a pond, a mostly frozen pond, but there was like a spring-fed part, so there was like probably 10 feet of water there. And I wear chest waders and stuff, especially that time of year, getting out, duck hawking. And I kind of snuck around where I could see without being seen around these trees. And there were like 12 ducks, mallards and black ducks and stuff. And so I snuck back, and this is going to be great. And I get my bird. I go out to another whole part of the field. So see, there's trees in between. I can put my bird out in this open field, and he knew the drill, kind of follow me, going up really high, and then filling up my pockets with rocks and things. So I get out there and I put him up, and he's going up 600-700 feet, and he's just going, oh, this is going to be great. And I'm just about to start sneaking around. And all of a sudden, he just kind of stopped and sort of set his wings, and then kind of just starts drifting down out into the field. I go, what the hell's going on? And I got my binos and I'm looking, and there was a dead deer that had been hit by a car the night before or something, falling down there, and all the vultures and crows, they were eating this thing. So he goes down there and starts chomping on the steer. Oh, and so I wanted to get out there. I didn't want to give up on this flight. And so I get to where, there was sort of a dike by that part of the pond, so I could crawl on hands and knees and they couldn't see me. So I get out there and I get my bird off there and hood him. And then I have to kind of crawl back. I mean, this is a long way too. This is probably 2.5 football field lengths or something, across the snow, a foot of snow. And I get back there, God, what am I going to do? And that deer's still there. So I put him in the car, and I always had a little folding shovel in case I got stuck in the snow or the mud or anything. So I'm going to bury that deer in snow. So I crawled all the way back out there again, buried the deer in snow, crawled all the way back to my car, and then I got my bird out and put him up, and he went up really high this time. He had a little bit of food in him. And I go over there and run out there and throw a rock, yeah. And he's up so high, they start to go up and go right back down. They won't be flushed. They're unflushable. And he's in perfect position. And I just ran closer to where they were, and I did a cannonball breaking through the ice. And they all flushed that, and he nailed one. He got a duck, so it worked. So it's both embarrassing, but kind of, But I worked so hard. Can you imagine crawling across a giant field, 4 times? But
well, yeah, I mean,
ended victoriously anyway.
No, yeah, with maybe a side of hypothermia too. I don't know.
I used to have the worst. In fact, it's really cold here right now. I mean, it's so cold. My hands freeze. It was like 5 degrees this morning, And but there have been many times when I've been trying to drive home and I got my hands out by the heater so that the hot air is blowing right on them. And then it hurts like hell when your feeling starts coming back. So you can't win.
No, it just brings more pain, for sure.
Yeah.
I've been there, done that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's awesome. Well, I mean, that's a good note to end on, I think. And then I'll just get a piece of advice you might want to leave to maybe future or, even current generations of falconers, and I just or a sentiment, and we can call this good and get on with the rest of the day, man.
A piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. Just don't give up. Just keep hang in there. I think it's a good. I mean, either that or get out early. If you can't do this, do something else. Don't falconry. You're either all in or you're out. So,
well, I don't know about you, but I mean, the guys that we kind of have in come and shadow our group to that are thinking about getting into it and stuff. I mean, I always jokingly, but also not jokingly, tell them it's just like, why do you want to do this? Don't do this. This is one of the dumbest things you can get into. Don't do it. And they kind of laugh, and I'm like, I'm actually kind of
that
not.
Wasn't a joke.
No, I was really not kind of joking. You will suffer some if you do this. But no, I agree 100%. You either gotta, kind of face the music early. If you face the music early, then honestly, sometimes it's for the best, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But well, Tim, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed hearing about all your experiences, and I'm sure we just barely scratched the surface. But but once again, give a list of your books and where people can get them if they're still in print. And,
I didn't finish. That's right. I didn't get past Parts Unknown. And then there's the Grail bird about the ivory-billed woodpecker, my search for that bird and other swamps. And that was, I liked that because it was like history. And there were a lot of people still alive who'd done interesting, had seen them in the forest. I interviewed a lot of people, and they're all dead now. I mean, I was interviewing 99-year-old people who would die 2 months later. I felt like I was the angel of death, But so maybe they just needed to get something off their chest. So there was that, and then Falcon Fever, about my experience growing up as a falconer, and some of my misadventures, and yeah.
Nice. And then the book that you discussed about, Frederick also.
Well, that's in that Falcon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the last half of it is all Frederick. The first
Gotcha.
half, like me, up to about age 19, and then and there's Imperial Dreams, about similar to the ivory-bill woodpecker. It's the ivory-bill woodpecker's Mexican cousin, the biggest woodpecker that ever lived, the imperial woodpecker, and they only ever existed in the Sierra Madre Occidental, which is real heavy drugged country now. And I had some really, really scary times there, and was lucky to get out alive, I think. I went there like 5 times in the space of a year and a half, and the last time I was like, I just can't do this. Yeah, guys with AK-47s everywhere, and people being kidnapped and houses burned, and yeah, that was really the scariest thing I've been involved in. And then after that, I wrote a book, Born to Fish, about Greg Meyerson. He set the record for the largest striped bass, and it still stands. He was an interesting character because he caught that biggest bass and then felt bad that he killed this. I mean, they're all females that are that big, the world record ones. And, so he became like a conservationist. He still catches them, but wants to catch and release. But he was an interesting character because his father had been in the mafia, and he had the strangest childhood, and just, had amazing stories. And I met all his people, his relatives and friends, and interviewed everyone. And that's a book I really like, actually. I was happy with some of the things. And,
nice. Well, that's awesome. Well, yeah, and I'll have to put Falcon
and
Fever.
They're all like on Amazon. And
sure.
Like that, yeah.
Well, Falcon Fever's been on my one of my to read lists for a while, and I need to go ahead and bite the bullet. Probably, it sounds like, and just because I've read a couple of things on Emperor Frederick and stuff. Yeah. I think he's a really fascinating guy too, and the fact that he knew like 5 different languages and stuff too, or whatever. Right. It was just, he was just a really fascinating character, I think, in history. And so I'll have to give that a boost in the priority list, I think. So, but yeah, thank you again. I know we could probably keep going on and on and on. But I know you're an hour ahead of me, and I'm sure you probably have other things you want to do with your day. I mean, thanks so much for giving me, almost an hour and 40 minutes, of your time today. And this has been a lot of fun, and it's nice to sort of kind of officially meet you for the first time.
It's great.
Yeah. So I hope it was fun for you, at least a little bit too. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk more again. I prefer to do these things in person, but anymore it's just becoming so hard logistically to work that out.
I'm glad you did it with a thing like this. It's much better than doing a phone call.
Oh yeah.
See the person.
Well, nothing beats the overall quality of in person for sure. But I definitely prefer this particular, streaming service platform and stuff. I think it's even better quality than Zoom. And so I'm an audio nerd. I can't stand, putting out, stuff that's, I'm kind of an audiophile in that regard. It bugs me if things aren't, up to snuff to that end. So, I'm glad that things worked out good on your end, and internet connection was good and held up for us and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, thanks again. And just go ahead and stick on here for a few more minutes while these files finish uploading. And, like I said, hopefully we'll get a chance to do this in person sometime.
Great. Do you know when this will be on the Chronicle?
Probably, I don't know, a few weeks.
Okay.
something like that. So I'll have to look back through, but we'll talk about that a little bit more after I stop the recording here. But thanks again, and like I said, we'll talk again soon, hopefully. So.
Great.